Shouldn't he be, I don't know, doing something else already? Greta Koch's voice sliced through the clink of silverware against expensive porcelain, as sharp and cold as the marble of the dining room. She glanced at little Maxim, nestled serenely in his pram, with an air of critical assessment as if inspecting faulty merchandise. My Matis, at that age, recognized colors. We had flashcards, you know. Early stimulation is everything. The ensuing silence was heavy, laden with a judgment. Olivia Kovacevic felt in her bones, a chill the mansion's central heating couldn't dispel. At 34, Olivia had never imagined the first family dinner after her husband Eric's death would be such a subtle, yet devastating battlefield. She was there, trying to build a bridge to her son, a connection to grandparents he would barely know. But every word was a stone hurled against the fragile structure of that bridge. They just need time, Olivia, Eric used to say, with that incurable optimism she adored. They'll see the incredible woman you are. They'll love you. Now, with the echo of his words haunting her, the promise felt like a distant fantasy, a sweet lie they both wanted to believe. Eric's sister, Zoe Mazur Garcia, a woman whose kindness was always veiled in a layer of venom, seized the opening. Camilla Lee, my friend from college, has a baby the same age. He already babbles mama. She's enrolled him in a bilingual baby program. It's never too early to start, is it? She smiled at Olivia, a smile that didn't reach her calculating eyes. It was a competition, one Olivia and her son were clearly losing. Mathis Park Brown, the elder brother and heir apparent to the Weber empire, let out a stifled laugh. Relax, he said, dabbing his mouth with a linen napkin. Not everyone can be a genius. Someone has to do the grunt work in the future, right? The joke landed on the table with the weight of an anvil. Sebastian Weber, the patriarch, a man whose rigid posture mirrored his, control over family and business, sighed dramatically. He shot a look at his wife, Greta, a look that said it all. Asterisk, I told you so. I said this union was a mistake. Look at the result. They were a united front of disdain, a wall of privilege and arrogance. Anyone else would have cried, yelled, defended their child with fury. But Olivia didn't. She remained seated, her posture impeccable, her face a mask of unnerving calm. She simply watched. Her deep blue eyes moved from one face to another, registering every micro-expression, every inflection of contempt. This calm wasn't weakness, it was contained power. It was the serenity of someone who had weathered far worse storms and survived to tell the tale. Her tranquility seemed to unsettle them more than any emotional outburst. Beside her bag on the floor rested a small, time-worn leather folder. Olivia glanced at it for a fleeting second, an almost imperceptible gesture. In her mind, flashes of past moments painted a clear picture of this moment. Greta in the hospital just after Maxim's birth, suggesting books on developmental delays. Zoe dropping by with a gift for her nephew, a set of clothes for a 3-month-old when Maxim was already 8, with the flimsy excuse that it's better if it's big than small, isn't it? Sebastian on a phone call weeks after Eric's funeral, pointedly and coldly inquiring about her financial situation, as if she were a mere line item on the company's balance sheet. They were small cuts, tiny doses of poison administered over time. But Olivia wasn't fooled. She had seen the pattern. Eric had seen it too. And that was why the leather folder was there. The silence became unbearable even for them. Finally, Olivia placed her cutlery gently beside her plate. Her voice when she spoke was low but resonated through the room like silent thunder. You're right. 4 pairs of eyes turned to her, surprised. Agreement was the last thing they expected. Maxim is different. She paused, letting the word hang in the air, allowing them to savor it like a victory. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, she leaned down and picked up the leather folder. She placed it on the table, the soft sound of leather against wood capturing everyone's attention. And it's precisely because he is different that his father left him something specific. Olivia looked directly at Sebastian. Something I think you all need to see. A glint of curiosity mixed with arrogance flickered in the Weber family's eyes. They exchanged smug glances, as if about to witness the last pathetic act of a desperate widow. What could a woman like Olivia, an outsider they never deemed worthy of their son, possibly possess that would interest them? There, under all those disdainful gazes, she stood firm, like one guarding a secret too powerful to be revealed before its time. If this story of prejudice and overcoming touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to discover how a simple moment of humiliation would become the catalyst for a revolution no one at that table would ever forget. Olivia's statement hung in the air, but the Weber family's arrogance was an impenetrable fortress. Sebastian let out a short, patronizing laugh. "Olivia, dear, Eric was a sentimental man. Left you a letter, perhaps? Some poetry? It's very sweet of you, but I don't think this is the time or place for it." He waved a dismissive hand, as if she were a child interrupting an adult conversation. They resumed their meal, the clinking of cutlery once again filling the silence, a deliberate attempt to erase her from the equation. The conversation shifted, orchestrated, to topics that excluded her. They spoke of their upcoming ski trip to St. Moritz, the company stocks that had risen, the gala they would attend. It was a brutal display of power, a way to remind her of her place. She was the wayward son's widow, a temporary fixture in their opulent world, tolerated out of courtesy but easily disposable. Mathis, feeling the power on his side, leaned across the table, his voice a condescending whisper. "Look, Olivia, I know things must be difficult for you right now. If you need a loan for some special therapy for the boy or something like that, we can talk. Consider it an act of family charity." The word charity was delivered with a sadistic pleasure. It wasn't an offer of help. It was an assertion of dominance. It was a way to brand her as a charity case dependent on their magnanimity. The tension escalated as Greta, the matriarch, decided to deliver what she believed was the final blow. "By the way, Olivia," she began casually while cutting into her steak, "speaking of finances, thankfully Eric was very sensible with the main family estate. He left it all nicely tied up with us, the Webers. The house you live in, for instance, as you know, is in the family company's name. We've been extremely generous in allowing you to continue living there, for now." The threat was clear, cold, and precise. Her home, the only safe harbor for her and Maxim, was being used as a weapon against her. Olivia felt a knot tighten in her stomach, but her expression remained unchanged. She remembered the words of her lawyer, Pierre Vega, a man with shrewd eyes and carefully chosen words. "They will test you, Mrs. Miller. They will try to intimidate you, to make you feel small and powerless. Let them. Give them enough rope to hang themselves. Their arrogance is their greatest weakness." Olivia was not the woman they thought she was. They saw her as a pretty face who had lucked into marrying their son. What they didn't know, or refused to remember, was that Olivia Kovacevic held a degree in financial analysis and had worked at one of the city's most prestigious investment firms before deciding to dedicate her time to raising Maxim, a decision the Webers interpreted as laziness. As proof, she was merely a gold digger, seeking an easy life. But Eric knew her brilliant mind. He admired her intelligence, her quiet strength. He trusted her in a way he had never trusted his own family, people who saw love through the lens of financial statements. For Olivia, this wasn't about money. It never had been. It was about the promise she'd made to Eric on his deathbed, to protect their son, to safeguard his spirit, his individuality, from the toxicity of the very people who should have loved him unconditionally. It was about ensuring Maxim grew up knowing his worth, regardless of the petty standards the world and his own family tried to impose upon him. Her gaze settled on Maxim. The baby, oblivious to the emotional storm swirling around him, let out a soft sound, a gentle coo, and opened his eyes, fixing them on his mother's. In that instant, a wave of protective love, fierce and unwavering, coursed through Olivia, extinguishing any trace of fear. She took a deep breath. With a firm gesture, she pushed the leather folder to the center of the table. The muffled thud made them all fall silent and look. "Your generosity is truly touching," she said, and for the first time, her voice carried an edge of steel, an irony so sharp it should have warned them. "But I believe there's been a slight misunderstanding about what constitutes the family's main estate. Every new humiliation only strengthened something within her that her oppressors couldn't see. A quiet power, fueled by the very injustice they sought to impose. What those privileged people didn't know was that every act of contempt was writing their own sentence of defeat. and the document on the table was the judge's gavel, about to fall. Sebastian Weber reacted with the weapon he always used to maintain control: derision. "Olivia, dear, with all due respect to your grief, my team of lawyers, who are the best in the country, has reviewed Eric's will top to bottom. We know exactly what it says. We know exactly what belongs to us." He didn't even deign to look at the folder. To him, this was a desperate bluff, a queen without a kingdom's last card. He believed the game was already won. Zoe, always the supporting actress eager to please those in power, picked up the folder with an air of mockery. "What do we have here? Maxim's first doodle? Perhaps we can frame it. Who knows? Maybe it'll be worth something in 20 years. She laughed, and Matis joined in, pulling out his phone, a clear gesture of disinterest. But Olivia was unfazed. Her gaze fixed on Sebastian was like a predator watching its prey. "Open it," she said, her calm voice echoing with an authority they hadn't known her to possess. Her serenity was an anomaly, a discordant note in the symphony of power they had orchestrated. And that finally began to disturb Greta. A mother protecting her young isn't hysterical. She is lethally calm. With an impatient nod from Greta, Zoe opened the folder. Her mocking smile faltered and vanished. Inside lay not one but several documents organized with meticulous precision. At the top, a letter, handwritten in Eric's unmistakable script. Greta snatched the letter from her daughter's hands. As her eyes scanned the lines, the blood drained from her face, leaving her with a cadaverous pallor. The letter wasn't sentimental. It was a brutal dissection. Eric wrote of his deep love for Olivia and Maxim, and his equally deep disappointment with a family that measured human value in euros and social status. He explained that he had known for a long time they would try to control his legacy and his family after his death, and that he had taken steps to prevent it. Flashbacks of her conversations with Pierre Vega flooded Olivia's mind. The lawyer, a man Eric had chosen for his discretion and strategic mind, had explained everything. Years earlier, sensing the predatory nature of his family and suspecting his health wasn't ironclad, Eric had established a private trust, completely separate from the Weber generational wealth. It had been funded by his own brilliant forays into technology and venture capital, a side of him his family, in their arrogance, had never bothered to understand. He had named Maxime the sole beneficiary and Olivia the sole trustee, with absolute power until Maxime came of age. "The public will they saw is bait, Mrs. Miller," Pierre had said. "It's to keep them busy, to give them the illusion of control. The real weapon is the trust document. Use it when their poison is at its peak. Use it to disarm them." Back at the dinner table, Greta dropped the letter as if it burned. "This is ridiculous. It's just a letter," she stammered, but her voice trembled, betraying her. Sebastian, now alarmed, picked up the next document. It was the deed of trust for the Maxim Miller Trust. He began to read. His eyes widened. The room, previously filled with smug pronouncements, fell into a deathly silence, broken only by Sebastian's heavy breathing. Listed in the document were assets they hadn't even known Eric possessed. Majority stakes in disruptive tech startups, real estate in European capitals, and most shockingly of all, a portfolio of software patents Eric had developed in secret, under a pseudonym. For a moment, as Olivia accepted the insults without protest, they all thought they were about to witness just another helpless widow being put in her place. But now the document in Sebastian's hands was not a plea for help. It was a declaration of power. Under the weight of all those now shocked eyes, Olivia's hands were steady. Those who looked closely would notice that it wasn't fear that held them so, but the contained power of someone about to rewrite her own history and the fate of everyone in that room. The game had turned, and they didn't even know they were playing. Sebastian Weber's hands trembled visibly, the paper rustling in the room's deafening silence. This can't be true. Where did all this money come from? He looked at his son Mathis, the supposed business prodigy of the family, who was equally stunned, his mouth agape, his phone forgotten in his hand. Mathis stammered, his eyes darting over the document over his father's shoulder. The patents, these encryption patents, they're worth millions, tens of millions, on their own. Their castle of superiority was crumbling, brick by brick. It was then that Olivia spoke, her voice now not calm but cutting, each word a sharpened blade. It came from your son's genius. The same genius you always tried to mold in your image, that you tried to force into the family business but that he hid from you to protect. He knew you would only see figures, not the beauty of creation. She extended her hand and from the folder withdrew one last document. It was a single sheet, but its weight was greater than all the rest. And this, she announced, placing it on the table for all to see, is the most important clause in the entire trust. Pierre Vega had highlighted it with a fluorescent yellow marker, as if he knew it would be the final blow. The clause was a masterpiece of legal strategy. It stipulated, in no uncertain terms, that for any member of the Weber family, specifically naming Greta, Sebastian, Mathis, and Zoe, to have any advisory access, indirect benefit, or, and here was the crucial point, to prevent the liquidation of certain assets that secretly propped up the Weber's own company, they would have to be deemed, by the lifelong administrator of the trust, Olivia Kovacevic, as a positive, loving, and constructive influence on the beneficiary's life, Maximi. The administrator's decision, the clause added, was final, absolute, and incontestable in any court of law. Olivia let them absorb the impact. Then, she continued her verbal offensive. Every comment you made tonight about my son, every mockery of his development, every dismissive glance, it was all duly noted. With a subtle movement, she touched a small device on the table that had, until then, appeared to be a decorative napkin holder. A tiny red light blinked and then extinguished. It was a high-sensitivity digital recorder that had captured every poisonous word. My lawyer, Pierre Vega, calls this establishing a pattern of behavior, a pattern that gives me, according to this clause, full and absolute discretion to cut you off, not just from Maxim's life, but from any financial stability that Eric's secret money you didn't even know existed, provided you. Greta's face was a mask of pure horror. Arrogance had been replaced by primal panic. Zoe was ashen. Mathis looked as if he was about to vomit on the Persian rug. Sebastian, the great patriarch, stammered for the first time in his life. You can't. We're his family. Olivia looked him in the eye, and for the first time, he saw in her not the docile widow, but a queen, reclaiming her throne. I don't want your money, she said, her voice lowering to a lethally serious tone. I want my son to be loved, respected. That was the only thing Eric asked for. You mocked her baby during dinner, and in doing so, you placed your future, your legacy, in the hands of that very baby and his mother. With regal dignity, she stood up. She walked to the pram, lifted little Maxim into her arms, who looked up at her and smiled. I think this dinner is over. She turned and walked towards the door, not looking back, leaving the four Webers frozen in a tableau of shock and humiliation. The empire they believed to be unshakable, their inheritance was, in reality, a house of cards, and the keystone was the son they underestimated and the grandchild they had just ridiculed. In the center of that hall, where discrimination disguised as tradition once reigned, a new reality now took shape, like a symphony finally finding its harmony after years of discordant notes, proving that true power has nothing to do with money, but with love and justice. A year passed. Olivia and Maxim's world was unrecognizable, but not in the way the Webers feared. Olivia didn't use her power to destroy. She used it to rebuild. She didn't sever ties with Eric's family. Instead, she imposed new conditions, new rules of engagement. Visits to Maxim were now a privilege, not a right, and took place under her supervision. Her first demand was shocking to them: family therapy. Every week, the four Webers sat in a room with a therapist and Olivia, forced to confront the toxic dynamics Eric had tried to escape his entire life. At first, their participation was purely transactional, motivated by the fear of losing the financial stability Eric's trust guaranteed them. But slowly, painfully, something began to shift. Greta, the icy matriarch, learned to sit on the floor and build block towers with her grandson, her initially forced laughter eventually becoming genuine. Sebastian, the distant patriarch, discovered the joy of reading stories to Maxim before bedtime, his imposing voice softening as he imitated animal sounds. Mathis and Zoe, stripped of their arrogance, began bringing gifts that reflected their nephew's interests, not their own status. The change was motivated by greed, but the outcome, surprisingly, began to resemble love. They started seeing Maxime not as a reflection of their failed expectations, but as he truly was, a curious, intelligent, and loving child. And finally, they began to respect Olivia, not out of fear, but out of admiration for her strength and wisdom. She wasn't just the keeper of their money. She was the keeper of their family's soul. With the trust's resources, Olivia prospered. Not only did she ensure Maxim had access to the best opportunities, but she also honored her husband's legacy in a way his family never would have conceived. She created the Miller Foundation for Young Innovators, a non-profit that funded and mentored young inventors from underprivileged backgrounds and supported children with atypical developmental profiles, celebrating the very differences the Webers had once scorned. She found a new purpose, transforming her pain into power and her power into progress. The consequence for the Webers wasn't bankruptcy, but something far worse for people like them: loss of control. Their arrogance was replaced by a forced humility. They lived in the same world of luxury, but now they were tenants, not owners. Their legacy, their name, was now inextricably tied to the goodwill of the woman they had tried to humiliate. It was a gilded cage, one they had built themselves with their cruel words that fateful night. Pierre Vega, the lawyer, watched it all with quiet satisfaction. In one of his meetings with Olivia, he said, Eric knew exactly what he was doing. He didn't want to punish his family. He wanted to save them from themselves. He didn't just leave them money. He gave them one last chance at redemption, even if they didn't deserve it. And he trusted the only person he knew had the strength to do it: you. Olivia's friends, who had watched her suffer in silence for years, now looked at her with reverent awe. She had faced her dragons, and not only defeated them, but tamed them. They tried to destroy Olivia and her son's spirit, but they ended up destroying their own arrogance. Olivia learned that true revenge isn't about reciprocating harm. It's about using your own strength to build a future your enemies could never control. And you, what would you have done in Olivia's place? Would you have used the power for revenge or to force change as she did? Leave your opinion in the comments below. If stories of smart justice, where the underestimated rise, are what inspire you, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and turn on notifications. Because there's always a new story waiting to be told, proving that sometimes karma needs a little help to find the right address.